understand you. You're going to have to slow down, calm down, and talk to me. What is going on?
Somebody came in while I was sleeping. Me and my little boys were sleeping downstairs. Stand there, baby. Stand there. Look up. I was crying. We ran out to the garage. Very nice there. My babies are dying. They're dead. Oh, my God.
Down the telephone.
Oh, my God.
Is that the one?
Hold on, honey. Hold on. Hold on. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Ma'am, who's there with you? Ma'am,
What?
is there anybody in the house besides you and your children?
My husband, he just ran downstairs. He's helping me, but he's dying. Oh, my God.
Okay.
He's dead.
Okay, how many little boys? Is it 2 boys? Okay, listen to me. Calm down. Calm. Go ahead. 5801 Eagle Drive. 5801 Eagle Drive. It's going to be a stabbing.
When are they going to be here?
Ma'am, they're on their way.
Oh, my God. I was serious. I was serious.
Ma'am, how old are your boys?
What?
How old are your boys? No. Okay.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, he's dead.
Calm down, can you? Your name, Darlie? Your husband, Darren?
Yes, please. God, they're taking forever.
There's nobody in your house. You don't know who this is? There's a knife. Don't touch anything. Is anybody out there? Okay, ma'am, listen. There's a police officer at your front door. Is your front door unlocked? Okay. Okay, is 82 out on Eagle?
Oh my God. Oh my God. Why would they do this?
What did he say?
Why would they do this?
Okay, listen, ma'am. You need to let the officers in the front door, okay?
What?
Ma'am? You need to let the police officers in the front door.
This guy's playing over there and I already picked it up.
Okay, it's all right. It's okay.
We got the purse, baby.
Ma'am, hang on a second.
We walked in here and did it, Darren.
Okay, ma'am? Ma'am, is the police officer there? Okay, go talk to him, okay? Yes, that's okay. Go talk to him, though. Okay?
As little girls and boys, we look up at the glowing angel that gave us life with love and adoration. But for too many, this is not a happy reality. For many, the woman holding us is a true monster. These are their nightmares. Delve deep as we unravel the turbulent bonds between mother and child. You are listening to Monsters and Mothers with your host, Bettie Wilde.
Happy birthday, dear Devin.
If you knew Devin and Damon, you would know that they're up in heaven, and they're up there having the biggest birthday party that we could ever imagine. And they wouldn't want us to be down here being sad, even though our hearts are breaking. I know that Devin and Damon would want us to be happy.
In the early morning hours of June 6, 1996, 911 dispatchers in Rowlett, Texas received a panic call from 26-year-old Darlie Routier. She claimed that an intruder had broken into her home and stabbed her two sons, Devin and Damon, as well as herself. Her child, an infant named Drake, was upstairs asleep with her husband, Darren, and both were unharmed. When police arrived, they found Devin already dead and Damon died on the ambulance ride to the hospital. Darlie Routier had suffered bruises and cuts to her throat and right arm and was briefly hospitalized. "Somebody came in. They broke in and just stabbed me and my children," Darlie screamed during her 9/11 phone call. She described her attacker as a white male about 6 feet tall. Police had found a window screen in the garage had been cut, suggesting an entryway for the attacker to gain access to the home. Darlie and Darren Routier were a young couple, raising 3 young boys, Devin, 6, Damon, 5, and Drake, only 18 months old. Darren was a successful business owner earning $300,000 a year repairing circuit boards. They lived in the prestigious neighborhood of Rowlett, Texas. To onlookers, Darlie and Darren were an attractive couple who liked to show off in many ways. The young couple enjoyed all the new money rolling in, and Darlie was getting quite comfortable in her life of luxury. Darlie's blonde hair and petite frame drew a lot of attention, something Darlie wasn't shy of receiving. They purchased a boat and celebrated quite often. They bought fancy cars, expensive jewelry, nouveau riche, you could call them. Things are never what they appear, are they, though? No one could believe the nightmare that lived only doors away from the neighborhood of Rowlett. On the night of the murders, Darren was upstairs and the boys, Devin and Damon, watched television and fell asleep on the living room floor, with their mother asleep on the couch. The intruder stabbed the children. That's when Darlie woke up with a knife to her throat. There was a brief struggle, and Darlie chased after the intruder, who left through the garage. Darlie then called the police. The nurse that examined Darlie noticed that Darlie's panties were missing, and when asked if she thought she had been raped, she had responded that when she woke up she felt pressure down there. The rape test, however, was negative. Darlie described her attacker as a white male about 6 feet tall and wearing a black shirt and jeans with a baseball cap. A screen had been cut, the murder weapon lay on the floor, and in the alley 2 houses away, police discovered a bloody sock with both boys' blood on it by a trash can. If this were a robbery, then why had none of their valuables been taken? 13 gold rings and a woman's gold watch were left untouched. In an interview, Darren's words, "A sick individual took away the 2 most valuable things from us." There was so much blood at the scene that the crime scene specialists hoped that they could use bloodstain analysis to retell the story that happened that night. When the detectives walked into the family room, they were shocked that the first thing out of Darren's mouth was not "How was Darlie?" It was, "Have you seen Darlie? Isn't she beautiful? Doesn't she have gorgeous breasts?" And then said, "I can see why somebody came in, good-looking blonde with 38 double Ds from the South." The detectives looked at each other. They took Darren's statement, but his story did correspond with the evidence, so he wasn't considered a suspect. However, holes soon began to appear in Darlie's intruder story. Not long after, infamous footage surfaced that showed her laughing and spraying silly string around her son's grave. It wasn't long before many began to wonder whether Darlie Routier had in fact killed her sons herself. Forensic analysis showed evidence that was inconsistent with what Darlie Routier had told the police, and suspicion began to form around her. It seemed unlikely that it was a robbery, as there had been so many valuables lying out in plain sight that had not been taken. The pattern of blood drops in the kitchen seemed to come from someone who had been standing still, not running after an attacker, as Routier had claimed she had done. The fatal blow of evidence, however, was the blood splatter on the back shoulder of Routier's nightshirt. It was consistent with the idea that she was the one who had done the stabbing, and the puncture wounds on the shirt didn't match any wounds on her body, suggesting that the shirt was perhaps purposely stabbed by her to help serve as evidence for her cover-up story. Forensic analysis found evidence of large amounts of Routier's blood in and around the kitchen sink, suggesting that she had stood at that sink to cut her own throat and arm, which is what someone who purposely cut themselves in order to have wounds to show authorities as a cover might do. Darlie had spent over 20 years on death row and still holds that she was not the one who killed her kids. Many support her and many believe she is guilty. She had raised many questions, but the evidence is there in plain sight. Darlie had said that she had an excellent marriage, but Darlie was miserable, and 1 month before the murders, Darlie wrote in her journal a note to her sons which read, "Forgive me for what I'm about to do." Darlie said she and her husband had words before he finally went up the stairs to go to bed at 1 a.m. Could it be that Darlie realized she would have a tough time getting custody of her children and have an even tougher time of supporting them on her own? Darlie's supporters claim she did not have any sign of mental or emotional problems before June 6 of 1996, but Darlie had contemplated suicide just 1 month before she murdered her children. She called her husband at work and told him to come home, and according to her husband said they would discuss it. He became angry with her, though, for how she was feeling, and they never spoke of it again. Darlie had said that the couple did not have any financial problems, but the couple didn't have enough money in their checking account to cover even one house payment, which was already long overdue. The shop rent was past due. The taxes from the previous year still had not been paid. The car was broken down, the boat was broken down, the credit cards were maxed, and the credit card payments were all late. Darlie's husband said at the time of the murders that they hadn't argued, yet a few years later he finally fessed up and admitted that yes, shortly before we went up to the stairs to go to bed, the couple had been in fact arguing. Darlie's supporters claim that Darlie was an excellent mother and was always active in her children's lives, but Darlie was a party girl. She had a vacation planned just a few weeks off where she would be traveling without her children. She went to the strip clubs with her friends. She was a shopaholic, known to her family and friends as Shop Till You Drop Darlie. It seems clear that Darlie knew how to have fun and she knew how to spend money on herself. The children, on the other hand, were fed chicken noodle soup for their last meal and left to fall asleep on the floor in front of a television set. Darlie was known to have a short fuse. At Devon's 5th birthday party, Darlie became enraged after the boys had sprayed her with a water gun. She took a piece of cake in her hand and smashed it and smeared it into Devon's little face. When he became upset, she told him he deserved it. Darlie's neighbors have claimed they heard Darlie yell at the boys to get the hell out of the house. A woman who worked near Darren's shop said that Darlie would force her children to play in the parking lot unattended. In fact, when the news of the murders broke the following morning, the same woman said it seemed that everyone in town knew immediately that Darlie was the person who murdered her kids. Darlie states that she was the victim of childhood sexual abuse, yet she let the man she accused of abusing her take her children for the day just a few weeks before she murdered them, as well as Darlie's mother stayed married to that man for another 10 years after Darlie was supposedly first molested at age 8. Darlie says she didn't know she was a suspect until the day of her arrest, but 2 days after Darlie dialed 911 and reported that an intruder had stabbed her and her children, Darlie was escorted directly from the hospital to the police station where the police investigator immediately advised her of her rights. Darlie, she had the right to remain silent. Darlie decided to go ahead and talk to the police investigators without having an attorney present, and Darlie kept talking and talking, as well as coming back on her own to write a 10-page statement without an attorney present. Innocent, bereaving mothers don't do this. Darlie first said they stabbed her and her children. It soon turned to he. Was there more than one intruder? Darlie said the intruder stood there. Darlie said the intruder was walking away from her. Darlie said the intruder was holding the knife to her face. Darlie said she didn't get a good look at him. Darlie wasn't sure if he was black or white. Darlie's mother says that Darlie did not take a lie detector test, but in truth, Darlie admits she did take a lie detector test and failed. Darlie claims she was sleeping while her children were murdered and her throat was slashed, but also states that she is a light sleeper and was sleeping on the sofa for many nights previous to murders because the baby would wake her in the night when he moved in his crib. People would often ask why her husband was never investigated since he was trying to hire someone to break into their home shortly before the murders. In truth, during the investigation, and for a few years following her conviction, nobody said one word about her husband supposedly trying to hire someone to break into the Routier home for an insurance scam. When all is said and done, it seems clear that Darlie was acting just as Darlie had always acted. She liked being the center of attention. She liked spending money on herself. She liked to have fun. I think the prosecutor got it right when he said that her children got in the way of her need for money and attention, so she decided to murder them. Darlie had said, "If I did it, I don't remember." For me, there still remains a mystery about the sock in the alley, and I've thought about it for years and years, and wondered, how did that sock get there? And then it dawned on me, and I actually haven't heard this before. She knew she was going to do this, and if somebody is planning something like this, then she had, of course, access to her kid's blood, and I wouldn't have doubted that she actually planted it herself earlier, and nobody would have thought to look for it then. Darlie Routier has not only the eyes of a killer, the heart of a killer. Let's not forget she also has the mind of a killer. And I am certain that she came up with this idea after Darren had the idea of pulling an insurance scam and hiring people to come to the house. I'm sure she came up with this story in her head and decided not to tell Darren about it. They had been fighting, and she knew that she wouldn't get the remorse or sympathy that she needed from her husband because he wasn't supporting her earlier. She knew she was alone, and the only way out was to do this to her children. She said so herself in the diary. "Forgive me for what I'm about to do." Darlie has since gone on several interviews claiming her innocence and has a huge following of supporters who truly believe that she is innocent. I don't care how many times you can paint yourself as innocent, but those tapes just don't lie. The look in your eyes, your lack of remorse, it just tells a different story. And we know you are lying because the evidence doesn't lie. It's not an excuse, but I understand where her head was after coming to Darren with her depression, a new mother with a child, and all the responsibilities, fearing that nobody is going to listen to her and that she was always going to be trapped without help, frustrated. I get it, but it's still not an excuse. Being a young mother with a large family, maybe not with the support that you had hoped for. If you feel like you are suffering from depression and nobody is listening to you, there are many support services out there for you. Anyone on online groups that deal with depression, if you're thinking of suicidal thoughts or thinking of harming your children right now, then there is help for you. You will not be judged. There is another way out, and those children can be someone else's pure joy. You might need to take a breath. You might need to bring yourself together again. But please, seek help if you feel that you're in this situation. You should know that you can drop your children off at any hospital without any questions asked. Thank you for listening to Monsters and Mothers. And if you would like to share your story with us or be on our show, then reach out to us and follow the links below.
Thank you for listening to Monsters and Mothers. Subscribe to hear more chilling accounts of mothers who commit unspeakable horrors.